All right, everyone, link in the description, of course. I am very happy to say that After the Ashes, the second edition is now available. It's an improvement on the first edition that was made in 2015. This is a work that I myself authored, so, like, I can rework those. No problem with, like, copyright or anything, because, I actually wrote them. The work, essentially, is a survival guide, but it goes a little bit beyond. I'll just describe in brief its content. It goes beyond most survival guides that are like, hey, here's how to build a shelter, how to make fire, and stuff like that, and into a little bit of the philosophical. It includes a copy of the Bill of Rights, of course. I just figured I'd put that in there just in case, Might be the last book that survives the coming nuclear war. The premise of this book essentially is that unfortunately nuclear war is pretty much inevitable. There is no way to denuclearize unless you've developed something that makes nuclear weapons useless, in which case they probably get deployed preemptively. If not, it's probably a weapon you're talking about. It might be even worse than mutually assured destruction as it is now. Whatever the case may be, though, I see it as very, very likely that there eventually will be some sort of nuclear war on the planet. Simply as sabotage, an accident could happen. Breakdown in diplomacy, mad breaking down because of countermeasures, actually. When we talk about the US and Russia and China developing anti-missile and similar defensive systems, the risk is that those systems are sophisticated enough to essentially eliminate the threat of foreign use of nuclear weapons to a great degree. In which case, those nations will be under great stress to preemptively attack, specifically because they'll say, hey, if these countermeasures are fully developed, that we know that they're developing and deploying. If they're fully implemented, we won't have any retaliatory capabilities anymore. They could literally nuke us and suffer no repercussions. You then have to make a decision, do we then act preemptively in some manner? Ronald Reagan very wisely decided, with some of the systems that were being developed in the 80s, that if they ever were truly effective countermeasures, he'd give them to the Soviet Union as well in hopes of ending the nuclear stalemate altogether by rendering those weapons useless. Then people thought he was like a serial warmonger. It's actually quite funny. The book is 119 pages long, and it goes off into a little bit of the unorthodox, for instance, talking about how to decontaminate things. Somewhat important and somewhat lacking in a lot of the sort of apocalyptic literature that we see. It's more like, here's how to scavenge food. Well, that's self-explanatory. And there are a million other books that talk about it. I wanted to talk about the survival and rebuilding of humanity and society as a whole, rather than simply on an individual level, because I imagine order breaks down, 90% of the population is dead, the rest is, at risk of cholera, at risk of starvation and things. That population will need to bond together in some meaningful ways and structure itself, hopefully in ways that can prevent the issue from just happening again. The worst thing would be, imagine this. You have a nuclear war, and 50 years later, people have sort of rebuilt, and then someone else develops more nukes. Wouldn't that be a funny thing? They're like, oh yeah, this time around it won't happen again. Let's poison the earth and release some more atomic mushrooms. And of course, some outdated guides refer to nuclear war in more survivable terms because they're talking about weapons that are orders of magnitude smaller than the ones deployed today. They're Chinese missiles, some dozens of them that measure in the tens of megatons range. Most U.S. missiles are a megaton to 3 megatons. Some of the Russian missiles they're developing are 30. So you got to understand, those are county killers or even small nation killers. Imagine Macedonia gets hit by one of the largest missiles Russia has. There wouldn't be any Macedonians left. Their entire culture would be more or less completely destroyed because the blast radius alone would eliminate basically probably half the population of their country, and that's just the actual fireball. So again, link in the description. This is a work. I enjoyed writing it. I like this work a lot because as I was re-editing it, I was actually interested, while I was sort of skimming through it, I was interested within in the content. That doesn't usually happen. There are sometimes I sort of zone out because things are a little less interesting. This one holds my attention more, honestly. And a nice shiny yellow cover, of course, in order to make sure you can find it when the lights go out and there's like, radiation everywhere. That's about all. Peace out.